Imagine you move from a place where you lived all your life. Imagine you move and you leave all your children and wife. Starting all over again, but no one you know is around. Well, they didn't have to imagine. They built it up from the ground. How does it sound? Not easy cause it isn't. Could have phased them, but it didn't. But the raid bond, that's a winner. And they ran straight to the finish. You get to know them up close and personal. Wait, just give me a minute. Welcome to the front row. Can I get a drum roll? Intentional. We may be immigrants, but we are still intentional. We are dependable. It's just that set the bar, but still the best of all, we are intentional.
Welcome to the Intentional Immigrants podcast and channel. I am delighted that you're able to join me here today. Thank you so very much. I'm your host, Yolanda Jack. Today, we will be speaking with Jay Falcone regarding the importance of financial literacy for everyone, but more so for immigrants in particular. These immigrants would have relocated to a new country, so they need a whole lot more hand-holding than the average citizen. Jay will discuss the importance of financial literacy, and he will also talk about the important pillars, that is the foundation of financial literacy and what it is that we need to be aware of. Jay is a certified CPA, that means Chartered Professional Accountant, and he currently facilitates the financial literacy program that is offered by the Multicultural Association of Wood Buffalo. Just before Jay comes to us, if you have not already done so, remember to like, share, and subscribe to our Intentional Immigrants YouTube channel. The podcast can be found on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Podbean. You could also sign up for a newsletter on the website, which is www.intentionalimmigrants.com. So let's hear from Jay as to the importance of financial literacy. Hi, Jay. Welcome to the Intentional Immigrants podcast. I'm happy that you're able to join me again. But this time we're going to be talking about financial literacy and the importance of it especially for immigrants, for everyone, but especially as it relates to persons coming into a new country.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me again, and really good to be here.
Thank you. What is financial literacy? That's the first question I have for you, Jay. What is it? What do you think?
Sure.
And it means?
Yeah, so financial literacy, it's the ability to read, listen to financial information and actually interpret it so that it makes sense, and also to whether it applies to your life or not in any respect. So if you think about it, we hear a lot of information on news, business news, right? So inflation is going up, for example. It's let's say 7% over last year. Okay, well, what does that mean? And understanding that, and then more importantly, does it apply to me, and does it affect my family? Do I need to make any other decisions because of that, or whether it's I need to change something, I need to do something? So it's understanding those financial terms.
Okay, thank you. In terms of immigrants, persons coming into a new country, I know that you've taught financial literacy, especially to immigrants. What do you find as some of the harder concepts for them that would be new to them, that they are not familiar with and that they need a little bit more hand-holding with?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I guess I always start off with banking, right? Newcomers come from all over the world, right? And, you kind of think of, okay, it's just banking, but, in some countries, the banking systems are different. Canada, for example, has one of the best banking systems in the world. It's very regulated. If you notice, we have very few banks in Canada, and the government is so confident of the banking system that we have what's called CDIC insurance, which means that if any bank fails, the government will pay through CDIC up to $100,000 of deposits that you may have. So that's different than many countries that newcomers come from. So banking is important. And when I talk about banking, it's not as simple as just opening up your bank account, right? There's so many people that spend more money on banking than they should through fees or not setting up the right bank account. So something as basic again as banking, you kind of think, well, it's nothing. This is where some money can leak for all of us in banking fees and not having the right bank set up, right? So that's the first one, Elander. Then it comes to credit, right? So even though a bank can't refuse to let you open up a bank account, a bank doesn't have to lend you money if they don't want to, right? So with newcomers, for example, they may be coming from anywhere in the world where their credit rating that they've established over the years, it doesn't mean anything in Canada, because Canadian lenders want you to have credit history in Canada. Mm-hmm. So, if you want to borrow money for whether it's a vehicle or your home, you're going to have to get good credit. So, I always tell newcomers that you want to start establishing good credit as early as possible when you come to Canada. And the way to do that is really, to get a credit card, get a small amount as a credit limit, use it, okay, wisely, pay it off every month so that you're not paying interest. But what you're doing there is that you're building up credit over time so that, and you'll notice that as you continue to do that, the credit card companies will want to increase your credit limit, and that's okay, but do it cautiously. But the important thing again is paying it off every month. And you'll find that over a period of time, you're going to establish a credit score. And this is what lenders will look at to determine whether you're a risk or not, and what kind of interest rate that you might get on a loan. So very important for newcomers to establish that.
Okay, so that's banking and that's establishing credit.
Yeah, and again, simple things. Then the next thing that I always tell folks to look at is, how are you controlling your money? Because we all find that when we don't manage our money well, right, what happens is that expenses come up, and by the end of the month, sometimes there's not enough money left for everything that we want. More importantly, it's those things that we want to save for. So one of the things that I always talk about is to control your finances is to prepare a simple budget. Okay. Now, when I talk about budget, I know some people go, "Oh no, I don't want to do numbers in that," but it doesn't have to be complicated, right? When it comes to establishing a budget, it's really, the first step is looking at those expenses that you have every month. They're called fixed expenses. Things like your mortgage or your rent, utilities, those type of things. That's one bucket. Then I get into another bucket, which is important savings. So these would be things like, let's say you're paying off, let's say a loan, right? It's important to pay that off. You're saving for your child's education. You want to put up a little bit every month for that. That type of thing. An emergency fund, which I'll talk about in a sec too, which is very important. To me, that's another category of expenses that you should plan for. Because what happens is that most people, like I said, when it comes to putting money away for savings, they only do it if there's money left at the end of the month. And sometimes there isn't. So, but if you make that like an expense, in your budget and you plan for that, then it's going to get paid. The third category that I talk about is everybody wants to retire and everybody needs to put money away for that. So a third category is retirement. So what are you putting away for retirement? And it could be money that you're putting into an RRSP, a registered retirement savings plan. What are you planning for that? Okay. Once you've taken care of that, you have money left over, and I call it your spending margin, right? Because a lot of budgets, they get into, okay, you can't spend more than this and you can't spend more on this. The way I look at it is your spending margin, this is where you buy your food, clothing, things like that. So, if you look at our food budget, for example, it's never exactly the same every month, right? One month it might be a bit higher than the other, right? So, 1 month you may want to go out for dinner more with your wife, your husband, your partner. Then another month, you should be able to do that. Money is made to enjoy, not to be, hey, you got to do this, this, and that. So that's what I call my spending margin. And that's what you have to spend that month. It's a different way of looking at budgeting rather than, like I said, putting it into categories that you can't spend. And this has helped a lot of people. With controlling their finances, Yolanda. And the other one that I just talked about briefly was the emergency fund. Okay, so emergency fund is part of that important savings that I talked about. But for example, we just went through, obviously, COVID here for 2 years, and not everybody had money saved up to deal with that. Or in the area here in 2016, we went through the fire, we went through the flood here a few years ago. A lot of people don't put money away for those things that happen in life, right?
For the rainy day?
I'm sorry?
For the rainy day?
For the rainy day, yes, exactly. So I always tell people you should put away 3 to 6 months of your fixed expenses that I just talked about, those ones that you have every month, plus groceries, right? And what you want to do is you want to work up to that, okay? Now, I always say 3 to 6 months because it all depends on the individual situation. For example, if you have a spouse or a partner that's working, you may not need 6 months. If you have government programs helping you, you may not need 6 months, but a minimum of 3 months. And that helps for things like we just talked about, but other things like, the furnace breaks down, or you have, a big car maintenance bill 1 month, right? And that's important because what I found is that people go into debt when events like that happen. And then to get out of that debt, it's a steep hill to climb. So if you plan for that, you leave it aside, and maybe you may never need it, and that's great. But chances are that, sometimes, like I said, in life, those things will come up. So that's sort of the third pillar that I always tell people, and especially newcomers, to help control their finances, because our money just kind of slips through us very quickly through those bank accounts every month. And then the fourth area that I talk about is having insurance. Now, I'm not saying to go out and over-insure yourself, right? But what you want to do is, you're working here now in Canada. You're, hopefully doing, putting some money aside. You're growing your assets. You want to protect those in the case of something were to happen. So, for example, there's life insurance. Again, you want to be cognizant of what you should buy. Like, there's different products out there. You want to do some research and find out the difference between the different products before you sign an agreement. There's disability insurance. Sometimes you may be working for a company that doesn't provide disability in the event that you are injured and become ill for a long period of time. There's an opportunity to buy that. Of course, you have home insurance. If you don't have a home and you're renting, it's important to have tenant insurance. because during the fire again and the flood,
Yes.
there was people that didn't have that.
Yes.
And yeah, and it could cause a lot of problems. And then, of course, if you do have a home, that you want to have home insurance, and then auto insurance, which is mandatory in Alberta, which is great. And you want to shop around, and you want to be able to, lower the cost as much as you can, but provide the coverage that you want. And this is where, again, some folks, again, they get into insurance arrangements and then they never look at it again, right? They just renew it every year. But it's important to understand what's in your insurance policy. So those are really like the 4 pillars I talk about for, especially, like I said, individuals coming over here from all over the world, that to help you get set up financially.
Okay. So once they have mastered or they have learned about those, then they have a more solid footing when they are establishing themselves in a new country.
Of course, yeah, and it also takes away a lot of stress, right? If you have, for example, a good credit rating, and you can buy and get the money that you need when you want it, that's good. If you budget and you control your finances and you've taken care of all the things that are important to spend on, it takes off a lot of stress, right? We all know that financial stress is one of the most prominent stressors for Canadians. And I was reading a study about this just about a half a year ago, where they talked about, what's the biggest stressor in your life? And actually financial stress is way high up there with health, right? Worry about health and worry about finances comes up quite a bit, actually above relationships in terms of stressors in our lives. So, anything that we can do to minimize that stress on the financial side is going to help you on all the other pieces of your life, whether it's health and whether it's relationships too.
It will. All right. Can you tell us a little bit about taxes? Because I would say a large majority of immigrants, the country that they're coming from doesn't quite have the same setup in terms of taxes and return of taxes and tax refund and all of those things, like Canada or the US.
Yes. Yeah, I know
that. Touch a little on that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And typically when we do our financial literacy program, taxes is one of those obviously subjects that we go into also. And if you think about it, most people, when they realize that their biggest expense is not their mortgage or their rent, it's actually their tax bill, right? When you realize that, you figure out that you should know something about taxes. Now, again, taxes can be very complicated, right? And I know that a lot of people just say, you know what, I'm just going to let someone else do it, or, that's not for me. But you need to know enough of the basics of the tax system so that you can ask the important questions when you go to someone that prepares your taxes, whether it's a tax preparer or whether it's an accountant, all right? So even taking a basic course in tax, okay? Again, not to get you to be an expert, but just to understand what's included in income. What deductions can you take in terms of being as a person in Canada? And then most importantly, is just as important, is what kind of offsets can I have? What kind of deductions can I take that reduce my tax bill? So we talked about the RRSP, the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. Well, that's great, because the money that you put into there, the government is also going to give you a tax break on your taxes for doing that. The tax-free savings account, which is another way that we can save money, where we invest, make an investment, and And the money that we make on that, we don't have to pay taxes. So basic things like that, understanding that is really a start for you to lower your tax bill. Because like I said, I always tell people, most people don't know what their tax rate was last year on their taxes because someone else did it. And it's like another, I've done it for the year, right? But you need to know that. And you need to look at ways to reduce your taxes within the law, right? We're talking about what's called tax avoidance, which is legal, not tax evasion, okay, which is illegal. And you need to know, again, the basics of that, so that you can ask the questions, right?
You can ask the right question. Knowledge is power, as they say.
It is. It is. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Jay, do you have any other tips or any more tips for my immigrant listeners, or just for anybody in general?
Yeah, no, I think when it comes again to financial literacy, just to bring it back in the loop, it's important to take care of your finances. And I always tell people, Yolanda, that if you don't care about your finances, nobody else will, right? So if you don't care about being charged, for example, on your bank statement for more fees than you should, no one's going to care. Okay, nothing against banks, but they're not going to call you and say, you know what, you could probably do better here. CRA, they're never going to call you and give you tips on how to save taxes, right? You might get a call from one of the fraudsters or scammers, but you'll never get a call from CRA and say, you know what, Jay, if you just topped up your RSP, you could reduce your taxes, right? Even going to the grocery store, right? It's something as simple as that we do every week or a couple of times a week, right? If you don't care about being overcharged on something, no one else will. You got to take control of your finances. And to do that, it's not something that's, that's overly complicated, right? There's basics to it, but you need to be educated on it, right? I encourage people to read books on financial literacy. There's a lot of books that you can read on that. I encourage people to take courses, right? I know that you're aware. We're also aware of the Multicultural Association of Wood Buffalo. Twice a year they do financial literacy program, a level 1 and a level 2, and we've had over 600 people go through that program, mainly newcomers to the region. And you need to educate yourself if you want to take control of your finances. It's going to take a bit of work, but again, a lot of people don't do that. They leave it to someone else. And when you leave it to someone else, you run the risk that you're not managing your money well.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so very much for sharing with us this evening.
Well, I appreciate the time, and thank you, and all the best.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Thank you for tuning in to the Intentional Immigrants podcast and channel. Today's episode was made possible by today's guest, Jay Falcone. Xavier Anderson provided music. If you like what you're hearing, connect with us at www.intentionalimmigrants.com or on our YouTube channel or by podcast. If you like to listen while you're exercising or while you're washing the dishes, whatever the reason, you can always connect with us by podcast on Google Podcasts, Stitchify, Spotify, and Podbean. As always, I am your host, Yolanda Jack, reminding you, he who watches the wind will not sow. He who watches the clouds will not reap. Ecclesiastes 11 and verse 4. You were born for greatness. Step out into your greatness so that mankind can benefit from you being here. So long, until next time.
Intentional. We may be immigrants, but we are still intentional. We are dependable, it's just that set the bar, but still the best of all, we are intentional.